Okay, so in the last video we added a particle system of steam to our door blueprint, which will look pretty cool if we can get it under control. So if I come over here to the My Blueprint panel, I'll see that I have a category for effects, and I have a steam particle system in there, which is pretty cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this steam, I'm going to drag and drop it over here on my graph, and I'm going to set it to be a get node. So there we go. So now I have my steam. Now what I need to do is I need to look at my blueprint, and I also have to think about my instructions, right? Now that we have a particle system, the first thing that I want with this particle system is I want to tell Unreal when the game starts, this particle system has to be off because it can only turn on when the door gets open. So we have to make sure the particle system is off when we start. So if we jump back to the level, we hit play, we walk up to this door and look at it, well, the particle system is already starting. Now it looked like it started when the door opened, but that's just an illusion. So let's go to the side of the door. We can see the particle systems have started and the door is not even open. So that's incorrect. That's not what we want, at least not for this example. So the first thing we need to do is tell Unreal, keep those particles shut off when the game starts. The easiest way to do that, and we could actually do that here in Blueprint, but it'll be redundant. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Components, I'm going to click on Steam, I'm going to go down all the way to the bottom, and you're going to see this Auto Activate option, which is on by default. I want to turn that off, and I'm going to compile this, save it, jump back into the game. I'm going to run around the side here so I don't touch the trigger. I'm going to look at the door, and now you'll notice there's no particles. So we've successfully told Unreal to keep those particles off when the game starts. Do not auto-activate them. I'm going to go to the graph now. Okay, so here's our Steam variable, right? What we need is a way to tell Unreal, okay, now that the door is opening, go ahead and activate these particles. Turn them on when the door opens. So the easiest way to do that is I'm going to click on a blue pin here from the Steam particle system, and I'm just going to go ahead and let the contextual menu help me out. So I know that auto activate turns off the particles automatically when the game starts. So it sounds like the terminology activate is the right word to use here. So I'm going to look for something called activate. And cool. Look at this, the filter just narrowed down two entries for us. We have an activate and we have a deactivate. So right now what I want to do is I want to activate the particles when the door opens. So I'm going to get the activate, and that's going to work perfect. See, it's already plugged in and it's ready to go. So now I need to actually turn this activate on by plugging something into this execution input. So what we need to do is we need to look at our blueprint and go, okay, now that I can activate this, when do I activate it? Do I activate it after the door opens? Do I activate it while the door is in the middle of opening? Do I activate it before? What do I do? So in my head what I'm thinking is the player walks up to the trigger. When they overlap or touch the trigger or start touching it, that's when I think the steam should start, because this means the door is getting ready to open. So the steam starts up and then the door opens. So we know that this trigger volume here controls that. So I'm going to take this guy, move him up here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the execution pin here and I'm going to plug that into activate. And what will happen is when we go into trigger, we'll activate the particle system called steam. Alright. Once we activate it, then we want the door to start to open. And that's it. So I'm going to compile this, jump back in here. Let's play this. Let's run around to the side here. Don't touch the trigger. The particles are off, which is perfect. Now, based on what we did, theoretically, what should happen, or what we think will happen, is when I go into trigger, the particles will start to emit, and then the door will open. So let's go in here. Let's go in this trigger. There, the particles are starting, but the door's already open. So we got the functionality to work. The particles are working, and the door's opening. The problem is the door's opening a little bit too soon. So by the time the particles start to fire up, the soft kind of slow steam takes too long, and by the time it starts to show up and we see it in all its glory, the door has already been opened. So everything's working, just we need to work on our timing. Our timing's off. So what is one of the best ways to control timing in a blueprint? Well, we already saw that in a previous video. The delay node. The delay node allows us to delay an action by X amount of seconds, whatever we want, before next action occurs. So that's pretty cool. So what we can do is use a delay node. So let's do that. I'm going to pull this guy over here, and what I'm going to do is, there's actually a shortcut for this. I could right click and then start to type in the word delay, and there it is. Or I can actually hold down the D key, D for delay, and then click. And that's actually a shortcut key in order to create this. So all you do is hold down the D key and then left click wherever you want it. So if I want it down here, I'll click there while holding down the D key for delay. Okay. Now I'll have to take this activate and plug it in here, and then I'm going to take the delay and plug that here. So now what's going to happen is when we go into the trigger, this guy is going to activate this particle system, and then it's going to start basically a little timer. Okay, and let's set that timer for about, I don't know, maybe 3 seconds, something like that. And then once the 3 seconds have finished, then we're going to go ahead and start to open the door. So that should look more interesting. Let's compile that, save, jump back over here, jump in the game, no particles. When I go into the trigger, the door does not immediately open. The particles are going to start up, and then the door opens. Now, we can't really see the particles, and that's not because of the blueprint. That's because of the particle system itself. Let me go to the particle system here. It's in the middle of the door, so the particles are actually being blocked. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move it a little bit in front of the door just for demonstration purposes. And I'm going to jump back in here and play. If I look at this, no particles. When I walk into the trigger, particles, oh, you know what? They're on the other side. That's what it is. Yeah, I'm looking at this the wrong way. So let me do this instead. I'm going to jump at the blueprint, and I'm just going to rotate this guy 180 degrees this way. Okay, I'm going to jump into the trigger here. There's the particles, and then the door opens. So you've got a nice little 3-second delay. I'm going to go ahead and go back to the graph, and I'm going to set that to about 4 seconds. And there's a really cool thing that we can do here to kind of make this a little bit more usable, so we don't have to keep coming back to blueprint every time we want to change this. What I can do is I could set up a variable for this. So check this out. It'd be cool, just like with the door stuff, if we had like a door open type variable that we can edit from here, right here in the details panel, that controls this delay duration. We can actually do that. So what I can do is I could go over here and I can right click and I could choose promote to variable, and it's going to create a new variable for me, and it's going to place it over here. Let me delete that. What I just did was the same exact thing as coming over here to the My Blueprint panel and going to new variable and typing in a name or whatever, and then setting this to a float, right? And then taking this, dragging it and dropping it, doing a get, and then connecting it here. See all those steps I just took? I'm going to go ahead and delete that and delete that. All that stuff I just did is the same thing. So the fastest way of creating new variables sometimes is by coming over here and just right clicking on this guy and just going to promote to variable. It'll create a new variable that automatically fits this data type. It'll give it a default name called new var, which is short for new variable, and it'll place it in your graph. So that's extremely fast. With one click, I basically did multiple steps. And then what I can do is I can select that new variable here and maybe change its name, because that would make sense. So let's call this steam delay. That's what that's going to be. And then we'll add a tooltip. And we'll say amount of time to emit steam before door opens. Okay, that's our tooltip. And finally, we'll click the little eye icon so that it's available to us inside of the Unreal Editor, and we can edit it there. Now we know that this is also something that has to do with effects because it has to do with Steam. So I'm going to go down to Category, set that to Effects, and now it's neatly inside of the Effects category. So I'm going to compile this, save, and I'm going to jump back into the map. And now you'll see that we have this effects steam delay. By default it's set at 0, so there's going to be no delay, which is not good. So I'm going to go and take the default property here, and I'm going to set it to 3 is what we had it at before, right? So I'm going to compile and save, go back to the map, and now we'll see the default value is now 3. So if I jump in here, go up to the door, start to see the particles, and then the door opens. Looks pretty cool, but maybe I want to slow it down a little bit more. Instead of going back to the blueprint and doing this and compiling that again, I can just come over here to the steam delay parameter, set it to maybe 4 seconds. Maybe that's what I want to do instead. And I don't have to compile anything. I can just go ahead and jump in here and see the change immediately. So there's the particles. They emit for a good amount of seconds, and then the door opens. Cool. So we got our particles working. Awesome. Now the next thing that we need to do is we have a problem, and the problem is if I jump in here and we activate this, the particles start up, door's going to open in a couple of seconds. There it is. Pretty cool. We got some hot steam. If we walk away, the door should close after that other delay. There it goes. It's closed. But we have a problem. The particles are still going. They're not stopping. They just keep going on and on forever. Well, let's think about that. What did we want Unreal to do? We wanted it to have a particle system with this door, make sure the particle system is off at the beginning of the game, make sure the particle system only activates when the door is going to open, make sure that the particle system plays for a few seconds before the door actually opens so that it looks cooler to the player. But then we're missing the other half of it, which is after a few seconds, stop emitting particles. So the way to do that is actually pretty easy. What we'll do is we'll use these guys again. Now, the activate is going to turn on the particles. It does not turn them off. And this guy's the steam over here. So what we need to do is, this is what I'm going to do just to make things simpler. I'm going to take the steam, I'm going to hit Control and W to make a copy of that. And this doesn't mean that there's 2 different particle systems. If I go back to components, we only have one steam, but we have 2 nodes that represent that one steam. That way I could use this one down here to do other stuff. So I'm going to click on the pin, drag it out here, let Unreal help me out. So we know that activate turns on the particles. So naturally, the opposite of activating something is deactivating something. So let's look for deactivate, and there it is. We have a deactivate function, and that's the one that we want. It's the opposite of activate. Perfect. So this function is going to deactivate the steam particle system. Now we need to tell Unreal, okay, this is when we want you to deactivate the particles.